Hello and welcome. My name is Shelley Wray. We have been doing a series of seminars on grief at Brocky Donovan Funeral Home. And since you can't come to us, we thought we would take this opportunity to go to you. I'm really happy and really pleased to be part of this video presentation. My hope is that you will find some hope from this presentation and that there will be something in this video that will be helpful to you. Brocky Donovan is still open, so if you have any questions about grief or loss or mourning, please call them. The number will be posted at the end of this video. Oprah Winfrey said that living in the moment means letting go of the past and not waiting for the future. It means living your life consciously, aware that each moment that you breathe is a gift. We're going to start today with a mindfulness exercise. I think that at this particular time in our world, it's a really frightening and really stressful place. And I hope that this exercise gives us a chance to simply pay attention to what's going on inside of us and let us separate from the world around us. Let us separate from the stress and the anxiety and the sorrow and spend some time just being quiet and thinking about wherever you are. So as we begin, if you want, we're just going to give you a minute to go and turn down some lights. So as we start, I'd like you to just find a place to be comfortable. If you like, lay down on your couch or bring in your yoga mat and lay on your yoga mat. If you don't want to do either, just find yourself a lovely, warm, comfortable chair. If you're on your mat or your couch or your chair, just allow your body to sink in. If you're in your chair, place your feet on the floor. Connect yourself to Mother Earth. Center yourself. If you like, close your eyes. If you don't want to close your eyes, find a spot a little distance from you where you can just let your eyes softly rest. Breathe. Take a moment and notice your breath coming in and leaving your body. Begin by noticing the temperature of your hands. Notice the feel of wherever your hands may be touching. Tune into the tips of your fingers. Is there a bit of a tingle in the tips of your fingers? There might be, and there might not be. Don't judge. Have no expectations. Just be curious. Now, continuing to breathe, begin to move up your arms, noticing any sensation in any segment of your arms, your forearms, your elbows, your upper arms and into your shoulders. Moving into the neck, notice any tightness or any tension in your neck. Breathe into wherever you find it. Don't try to change anything. Just breathe with curiosity. Move your awareness to the base of your skull. Back of your head and forehead. Once again, pausing and noticing sensations. If there's tightness, breathe into that spot. Shift your awareness to your eyelids, your nose, your eyes, and the space behind your eyes. Notice the nose and the sensation of air passing through your nostrils. Perhaps even noticing which side of your nose is more open, Which side receives more air? Notice the tongue, the jaw, and the front of your neck. Shift your focus to your chest, becoming aware of the rise and the fall of your breath. Notice areas of tightness and openness. Follow your breath and follow the sensations down into your belly and into your abdomen. Notice the fall of your belly. See if you can sense your organs and sense the space around them. Move down to your pelvis, noticing the movement. And even here, notice your breath and any other sensations. Shift your focus to the tops of your legs, your knees, your lower legs, your feet, and back to your toes. Move up into the lower, middle, and upper back, noticing areas of tightness and tension and breathing into them. Finally, return to your arms and your hands, noticing with curiosity how the sensations may have changed and if they're different than when you began. Continue to breathe. And when you are ready, and only when you're ready, open your eyes and come back into this room. We use the words grief and mourning interchangeably. In fact, I do it myself and I will probably do it today. But in fact, they are not the same thing. Grief is what is referred to as an abstract noun, a noun that describes feelings. And if you remember from being in grade 1 or 2, a noun is described as something that describes a person, a place, or a thing. And grief is a thing. Grief is that collection of feelings, that sorrow, anger, hopelessness, whatever it is you're feeling, just fill in the blank for yourself. Grief is the inside part of us that holds all our feelings. Mourning is a verb, an action word. Mourning is like grief gone public. Mourning is the outside part of us that shows our grief. And it's not enough for us to just feel grief for the loss. It's not enough to just have those feelings floating around inside of us. We have to mourn. We have to step up and intentionally express our grief. We have to show sadness, anger, isolation, hopelessness. And then the question arises about, if we don't do the action of mourning, what happens to all of those feelings inside if we do nothing about them? If we take those feelings, we stuff them down as far as they'll go, and we put a little lid on them, and we never want to deal with them, how do we stop that from happening? Someone once told me that buried garbage is still garbage. And if we don't mourn actively and let those feelings out and work those feelings through, we have inside of us garbage bubbling and moving and dealing around inside. It is the action of mourning that takes those inside feelings and puts them out so that we can lay them on a tray and deal with them one by one. We grieve and we mourn every single loss in our lives. A loss of a pet, a loss of a job, loss of a house. Anytime we make a change in our life, even if it's a change for the absolute best, we spend a little bit of time grieving what we had before. Of all those losses and of all those things that we mourn and that we grieve, death is the greatest loss that we have. And right now, we're all grieving losses. We're grieving the loss of our freedom. We're not seeing our friends as often as we want. We're grieving the loss of our gyms. We're grieving the loss of a feeling of safety. We're grieving our routines from before. We're grieving happy celebrations like birthdays, and we're grieving sad celebrations like funerals. We've experienced shock and disbelief at the changes in our world. We've worried for ourselves, we're worried for our families and our friends, and we're worried for the whole world. We're afraid. We're sad. And maybe we're lonely. We're angry and we're regretful for all that we've lost. And this is our grief. When somebody suffers one loss after another, and those losses are unaddressed, the grief that we feel can compound into what is called cumulative grief. You think about this time of Covid-19 and someone has suffered the death of someone they love. And maybe they've lost their home. And maybe they've lost a pet. Or they've lost a home and they've lost their job. Any of these combinations of any of these things cause cumulative grief. We're all suffering at one degree or another from cumulative grief. We all feel the loss of our lives in the way that it was. And cumulative grief is exhausting and overwhelming. I used to work at CFB Shiloh. I started there just at the time of the Afghanistan war. While I was working out there, we sent young men and young women to Afghanistan to war. At the beginning, our mental health team didn't even know where Afghanistan was, until somebody finally brought in a map, put a pin on it, and told us, this is where we're sending them to. We sent them off, and many didn't come home. The sense of loss at Shiloh was palpable. Friends and neighbors lost friends and neighbors. Children lost dads and moms. Moms and dads lost children. Husbands and wives were separated. And in our mental health team, the first thing we asked every morning was, who died? In the middle of all of that, my mom died. And I was devastated. And I went to my mom's funeral, and I couldn't tell if I was grieving the loss of my mom or the loss of all those soldiers. And all that grief piled up, like a glass. And when you put enough grief into the glass, it just overflows. And I didn't know what was happening. I actually thought for a period of time that I might be going crazy, until some very wise person said to me, this is cumulative grief. This is grief that is exhausting and overwhelming. This is too much grief at one time. And I believe that that is what's happening for all of us here during our COVID-19 times. It's too much grief at one time. However, saying that, even as we are all suffering grief and even as we are all suffering loss, we have to remember that all grief is unique. Everybody grieves in their own way. All grief is unique, and all grief is experienced at 100%. So, when you hear somebody saying, well, you know, I don't know why she's still so sad. Her dad died 5 years ago. It's not your grief. When you hear somebody saying, you know what, it was just a friend who died. I don't know why she's so terribly upset. It's not your grief. Your experience of grief and loss is based on your emotions, your personality, your experience with grief and loss, the circumstances of the loss, and when somebody dies, your immediate relationship with that person. There is no right way to grieve. There is no right way to mourn. When you lose somebody or something, your loss is different than everybody else who's had that very same loss. My sister had a dog named Carson. He was a little dog, maybe some kind of a poodle combination, and she got him from Funds for Furry Friends, and he had been a very abused little dog. She took him home, and she cared for him, and she trained him, and she loved him, and she spent days and days and days with that little dog. He was the most important thing in her life. She moved to Calgary, and she said to me one day, "Would you mind keeping this dog for a couple months?" 4 years later, we had to put him to sleep. So I called Sandra and I said to her, "Sandy, you have to come home because we have to put Carson to sleep." I was very sad about the loss of that dog. My husband and I had enjoyed that dog more than you can possibly imagine. But Sandra, on the other hand, was devastated. She was losing not only a dog, but a whole collection of memories and a part of her life. We took the dog to the vet. We had him put to sleep. I walked out the door, and Sandra stayed there with the dog, weeping and weeping. Most recently, I went to her house, and she still has little mementos of that dog up on her shelf. Her experience with that dog and my experience with that dog were different. My grief for that dog and Sandra's grief for that dog were not the same thing. It's all dependent on the relationship. When you lose somebody or something, your loss is different than anybody else who's had that same loss. And so, just a soft reminder as we enter into this time of COVID-19, we're all going through a collective traumatic experience. Trauma. Too much, too fast. And that's what's happening to you. Of course you're exhausted. Of course you're afraid. Of course you're overwhelmed. And of course you're looking for certainty in the midst of so much unknown. Of course you're not as productive as you have been. And of course you're feeling foggy or wondering how in the world you're ever going to get through this with so many waves of emotion in such a short time. All of this makes sense in the context of our circumstances. Be gentle with yourself. Have compassion for the process. Give yourself grace. You are good, no matter how you're managing this completely new experience. The most common response to death, even if it's an expected death, is shock and disbelief. The head and the heart don't seem to be connected. Experts in death and dying say that disbelief is an absolutely normal response. It's a kind of a survival mechanism. It gives us a little bit of chance for self-preservation. At some point, the head and the heart will connect, and it's a very confusing time. When the connection happens, we find ourselves overwhelmed by emotion, or we don't feel anything. At some point, when the connection is complete, we realize that we are going to survive the shock. And we start to accept the everyday reality of death. To acknowledge that somebody has died is a process. It's not an event. The process doesn't happen quickly, and it's exhausting. You move back and forth between saying, okay, I get it, the death is real, to saying, you know what, I don't believe this can't be happening to me. One moment, the reality is tolerable. The next moment, you can't believe it and you want to run away. It's been described as a roller coaster of emotions. We have traditions that are followed before and after death, And most often, these traditions include a funeral or some kind of a get-together after a death to honor the life of that person. It's not unusual to hear people say, you know what? It wasn't until the funeral that I really understood that my loved one was gone. We don't get over a death. We don't get over grief. We are forever changed by the experience. Over time, feelings of loss will soften, but time does not heal. It only softens the pain. The soft edges go away, and we learn that we can live with that loss. The intense pangs of grief become less frequent, but they still exist. And someday you will find yourself in the co-op store buying celery, or you'll find yourself walking down the street and you see a child, or you're at a place where there is a certain smell or a certain sound, and you will break into tears. And that grief and those pangs of grief and those pangs of sorrow will be as intense for you at that moment as they were the very first day. And we have to remember. And one of the ways that we remember, and one of the things that we do to remember, is rituals. A ritual has been defined as a solemn or religious ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. Someone once said that when words are inadequate, have a ritual. A ritual is a series of actions that we perform in an intentional way. We do it on purpose. We plan it and we do it on purpose. Rituals are good for us. They counterbalance the chaos of loss. Deliberate, controlled behaviors help us to feel less powerless in situations where we have no power. Rituals help us to control the chaos. When we behave with intention, we get to plan and we get to think about what our grief is going to look like. Not too long ago, a study was done by Harvard University. And this study said that for many people, the most meaningful grief rituals are private rituals that we do every single day, rituals that are absolutely unique to us. It turns out that people who have rituals in grief do better at resolving that grief than people who go without rituals. Behaving with intention, being conscious of what it is that I want to experience. It is the loss of the feeling of control that is the most traumatic part of difficult experiences. In grief, rituals are something that's bigger than the act itself. Rituals tell the story of who we are and what we believe. They provide meaning for us and they provide us connection. In grief, rituals are a meaningful part of the healing. Having rituals is nothing new to any of us. We've engaged in rituals all our lives. Think about first birthday parties, little children blowing out candles and covering their faces in cake. Making sure that you don't step on a crack. When you do step on a crack, break my mother's back. We do them because we've always done them, and we would feel out of balance if we didn't. Think about opening a beer. Think about the ritual of getting a glass of beautiful wine. Think about the ritual of having a glass of wine at a restaurant where the waiter brings you the wine, he opens the bottle, he pours it, you smell it, you sip it, and then you drink it. Think about the ritual of having a cigarette. No one just opens a package and smokes a cigarette. People have a side they open the package. They have a way they open the package. They take out a cigarette from one side or the other or the middle. They put it in their mouth and they light it. And when I was smoking, when I was 16 years old, we would always bend over to have our friend light our cigarette for us. At the center of all of these rituals is safety. In an addiction treatment center, clients make their beds every morning because it's important that they complete one task. And they complete that task to remind them that they are in recovery and that they are changing their lives. Rituals keep us grounded. We have beautiful, beautiful public rituals. Weddings and funerals. Funerals help us process our thoughts and our feelings and help us channel our grief into something that is healing. Funerals provide us with a structure of what we say and what we do. Funerals help us acknowledge the reality of death and help us to honor and remember the life that was lived. The funeral rituals that we know and love are changing. New rituals are being found to make funerals and memorials meaning events that provide honor for the deceased and support to loved ones. While the size of gatherings might be limited, options are not. The value of honoring your loved one has not changed, only the way it's done. You don't need to do something right away. However, if you choose to, a private family service can be held and can be streamed to include others who are unable to attend. Alternatively, a larger memorial service can be held at a later date. A funeral director can guide you through all of the options available to you during this unprecedented time. I was given the great privilege of attending a ritual for someone who died last Saturday night. I have a friend whose name is Gary, who died about a month ago, and last Saturday was his birthday. So a friend of ours arranged, and there was about 40 of us at 7 o'clock, raised a glass to Gary. It was a lovely ritual, and people were so happy to be part of that because, again, it made us feel grounded and it made us feel like we were part of something important. So, as you move back into your day, we would like you to remember that this too shall pass. We would like you to breathe. We would like you to live your life in an intentional way. We would like you to be grateful, and we would like you to be mindful. With intention and commitment, you can become whole again. When is the right time to start dealing with grief? Intention says that by being conscious of what you want, you can experience it. It's a way of actively guiding your grief and mourning. What you put out to the universe comes back. What we believe about ourselves can have a significant impact on the outcome of events. Commitment is a dedication to a cause. You are obliged to do something. I intend to reach out for help. I can survive this loss. So as we end, we're going to end with a poem by the Irish poet John O'Donoghue. This is the time to be slow. Lie low to the wall until the bitter weather passes. Try, as best you can, not to let the wire brush of doubt scrape from your heart all sense of yourself and your hesitant light. And if you remain generous, time will come for good, and you will find your feet again on the pastures of promise, where the air will be kind and blushed with new beginning. Hope and fear cannot occupy the same space. Invite only one to stay.